The story begins. Two slaves were transferred to get wood. As they were late, they decided to take a route that was formerly a battleground. It wasn't that long since it happened. Smallville got caught up in the battle. In this place came a cadaver field. As they were going, they heard a baby crying. They stopped to see that his father had failed while he was carrying the baby. They tried to ignore it and leave, but it was too important for the women. The hubby advised her that he'd have to live as a slave, but she promised that he'll be okay and she'll be taking care of him. His father decided that it's time for him to learn about books and munitions. Indeed, those slaves weren't allowed to. He took him to the basement and showed him their great forefathers' book collection. When the world starts to change, Nero should be ready. Many times latterly his father failed as he was working in the theater. His youngest siblings came rushing to him so that he could help, but it was too late. They buried their father under a tree and were crying when a man came saying that he should have taken his drug. Nero's mama riots at the man to leave because he was the cause of her hubby's death. The man swings his fist at her, calling her a. He stops when she tells him that she's the property of the Regas family, and he decides to stop and leave, but he tells her that he will buy her from her proprietor veritably soon. Many days latterly, as Sarah was working, she gets called by her master. He tells her that the man from ahead was now her new master. Nero and his two little sisters see their mama being taken by the man. She told Nero no way to cry in front of his two little sisters, so he did not exfoliate a gash. The coming day, Nero was running and he saw his mama's cadaver. His two sisters also came after him and he tried to hide the horrible scene from them. He also hears the Joe screaming that he does not want to go to jail because she was a slave, and she was the same as a steed. That night when his two sisters went to sleep, Nero started to curve himself a rustic brand. He decided to retaliate his father and mama and train to come stronger. He started to train every single day from that moment on. One time latterly, the emperor of the Mu Empire comes to the Regas family. The Regas family had came out to hail him. He asks if the boy that was standing with him was the son of Kindon, one of the empire's topmost icons and his stylish friend that has failed, and he says yes, and his name was Evan. Evan invited him over to their house so that he can give him a stint. Evan started to show him around the house and also show him that he's suitable to manipulate magic at such an age. Suddenly a herd of bulls came running at them. The guards tried to stop them, but nothing was working against them. The emperor told Evan to leave as he started to take out his brand. Also out of nowhere, Nero way between them he started to use as a fashion, and the Colosseum stopped. The emperor was impressed at how Nero stopped all of them. Formerly Nero was told by his father that he was a half brownie and that he was espoused when he was youthful. The emperor asked him if he was a half brownie and was suitable to communicate with creatures. Suddenly the bulls went out of control and started attacking again. As Nero got a brand, he swung at his neck and killed him in a single blow. The king asked him again if he used magic or if he's suitable to communicate with creatures, but he denied it because he worked at the ranch and they were familiar with him. The king tells him to choose his price, and he says that he wants to join the Excanum Academy. Indeed tells the king that Nero is a slave and that he cannot be allowed to join the academy. The king tells him that he knew Nero was a half brownie and that he communicated with the creatures to stop them, but he also communicated with them to attack him too. He tells his guards to shoot Nero a collie mine so that he works in labor for his entire life. That night Nero and several other people were taken to work in the mines. The same night a man with unheroic hair came to their house so that he could buy Nero's two sisters. He was a peddler that liked children. He offered to buy them for gold. Their master told the man that heard some rumors about him of what he does to small children. He offered him golden coins. Nero was crying as he was being taken. He did not want to leave his two sisters behind. He was suddenly hit in the face by a scourge. The guard started to hit the little boy as he go. Nero hears a laugh. They turn to see that it's a wolf eating notoriety. The guard shoots some arrows and he hits his target. The wolf runs down after they kept going. Indeed, though it was dangerous. After a couple of hours they reached the mines. They were incontinently told to start working. Indeed, though they were tired, they were told that they will only live to mine from now on, and if they don't misbehave they would simply. After a week of constant working they started to fall one after another. They were incontinently inclined off if they could not continue. That's when the guard heard commodity. He tells them to go get brands, but they would be breaking the law if they do. Their warden had also come flying out of nowhere. It's a monster and a huge bone. At that suddenly a huge layoff was thrown at the guard and he failed. The warden runs to them and asks if they did not know how to use a brand, but what can they do? Slaves weren't permitted to know how to use brands. In the first place, the monster was about to kill the warden when Nero came from over and cut at his hand. In one swing the monster turned his focus to Nero and attacked him. Back to Regis and the unheroic haired man who wanted to buy the Nero sisters. He tells Regis that he will still be available if he changes his mind. Indeed, though he refused to. Then the two sisters. Nero has killed the monster single-handedly. The warden was astonished with his skill bills. He decided to make Nero one of the guards in the mine. The coming day Nero was given some fresh new clothes and a brand new brand. The warden called for Samuel. Samuel is an elite dark knight. He is ordered to train Nero every day. When he is on duty, the other guards watched how Nero trained every day and was amazed by how presto he was learning. Samuel not only kept a close eye on Nero's chops and swordsmanship, but also his physical strength. One day as Nero was working, group of Guys approached him. They were jealous of Nero's position as a guard and they hovered to kill him if he didn't stop smiling. They left after being scolded by a guard. Nero was feeling down after that. An old man told him not to hear to them because they are just jealous. The exigency temptress also sounded. Nero wore his clothes and went out for battle. He saw the warden. When he went outdoors, he was down on his knees in front of the monsters. He was guillotined by the monster. Nero said at that point Samuel stepped in and told Nero to run down because he was not ready yet. Samuel started to attack the monsters, and he killed a lot of them. He was picked by the leader and was killed. Nero was spooked to death and he ran down back into the mines. He stopped when he saw that rest of the slaves have thrown their brands. He asked them what they were doing and they were planning to become slaves to the monsters. The leader of the monsters came and told them that they did not need slaves but they were in need of some food. Nero took out his brand and started to attack his juniors, but after some time he was caught by their leader and picked in the stomach. The monsters tell him that he is better than those other disasters, but since youthful meat was more, he'll be eating him. He was also struck by a surge of fire that suddenly killed him. It was the king. Nero was on his last breath. The king thanked him for what he'd done, but Nero was nearly dead. He asked him to entitlement him a favor by acting his two sisters, but the king refused because he was gone. Now save him. The other slaves came forward and tried to claim that they were the Bones who fought off the monsters shamelessly. The king knew it was Nero who saved his people and not this trash, so he killed them for lying to him. The king ordered his knights to take care of Nero until he makes a full recovery and to shoot him to the academy that he pictured of attending. After recovering, Vera was transferred home to say farewell to his sisters. Before he left, he gives them a clinch and promises them that he'll come back for them and they will no longer be slaves or poor. He leaves and goes to the wain that he will go with. He was told to sit in the luggage wain by the motorist. He was also stopped by one of the guards. He held his brand to the motorist's neck and told him to treat Nero well, else not only him but his entire family too will be wiped out. He gave Nero some robes and also they departed. Nero was given a new brand by the king. When he was being treated, it used to belong to the warden, but now that he's dead it belongs to no one, and Nero took it. What life is ahead of him and how far will he reach? The sun rises the coming morning. The motorist tells Nero to get up because they reach the academy. After a whole night of traveling, they have eventually reached it. They go to the entrance and tell them their family names so that they can enter. The guard greets them and welcomes them as indeed as the son of Kundun. The great mage Evan's butler was about to tell him about how Nero will be his slave, but the guard stops him before he talks and tells him that Nero will be the consanguineous son of the Regas family, meaning that they will be sisters and Nero will be a pupil. This was a really strange situation between the two. Nero was told by Evan not to follow him. He tells him to not call him master presently and to no way come near to him. The new scholars all gather into the academy hall. She gives a speech about the descendants of the icons and noble scholars that also were attending. They all start to cheer for her. Nero, on the other hand, was feeling left out. The other kiddas kept holding their tips whenever he gets close to them. They were transferred outdoors to get divided into groups. They were told that after being divided they will be going through an entrance test coming month, and if they fail they will be transferred back home. Two boys were talking about how they wanted to be in the group with the queen when someone walked up to them and slighted them both. It was Princess Tarasu. She heard what they said and she advised them about saying stuff like that about them. The professor yelled at her to stop or differently should be transferred home. She left as the two boys started to cry. Nero was amazed and he allowed that she was cool. The professor told them that the leader is going to be Evan as he grouped him with Nero, Neria, Jackin, and Haken. Nero noticed that Neria was also a slave and not from a noble family. Jackin and Taken were happy that they were in the same group as Evan. Indeed, though they got slighted, but Evan was really frenetic because he was in the same group as them. They were also transferred to where they will be living together from now on. They started to treat Nero and Neria like trash from the moment they all stepped into the room. They made them do their laundry. Neria tried to help Nero, but he pushed her down, saying that he does not need her help. Evan ordered Nero to get him, and he did, but he also forced Nero and Neria to give their share of food to Haken and Jacket. The coming day it was their first assignment and they were ordered to spar with each other. Haken and Jackin decided to go against Nero and Neria. The professor tells them to surrender if they feel peril and tells them to begin. Everyone began and it was all a chaos. Jackin approached Nero and told him not to worry, and he started to swing his brand at him. Nero went through him really presto and broke his brand to pieces. Jackin calls out for the professor and tells him that his brand is old. The professor tells him that he is checked beforehand and he gave him another one. Jackin rushed at Nero once more, but Nero did the same thing and he broke his brand in half in one swing. The professor and the other scholars were shocked. Jackin starts to make defenses about how the brand is old, but the school teacher comes to him and tells him to shut up. It was because Nero was stronger than him and was strong enough to break the brand. Nero forces Jackin to rendition as falls onto the ground. The preceptors tell them that winners will go to the right and the disasters to the left. The other kid has started to make reflections about Nero as he moved to the right. He could not watch lower about their reflections as he was busy enjoying his rustic brand and the experience he gained from Working at the mines soon after, someone differently came to the right too, and it was Queen Tarasu. Nero tells her that she was really strong as he was watching her spar, but she tells him that the other kiddies were just weaker. She asks him why he's talking to her formally, and he tells her that he's a slave. She asks him why it matters, and Nero is speechless. She tells him that she doesn't watch that he's a slave and to stop talking to her formally. Do the brownies not have any slaves? He allowed. After a bit of time, Evan came in. He said that he anticipated nothing lower from Tarasu. He tried to make small talk with her, but she was giving him no care. He tries to flirt with her, but she just tells him that she does not have time for him now and to shut up. He also invited her over for a mug of tea and moved down. He stood coming to Nero, and he told him to be careful as he'd meddled with the noble latterly. That night Neria came back home. Her face was all bruised up and she was crying. It's all the fault of that bastard called Haken. She did not indeed know how to swing a brand, but he kept hitting her. Evan and his group of musketeers come into the room. He calls over Nero and he comes running to him. He tells him that he has forgotten his place and orders him to come a steed. Nero was shocked, but Evan ordered him not to ask questions and to simply do it. Nero went down to the ground. Jack and went to him so that he could use him as a steed. The other sprat also called for Neria. He screamed at her to come to him. The dumb brat also used her as a steed too. Nero saw her crying and he felt pity for her. Evan and his musketeers went outside to cool off. After a while, Neria started to cry as her knees were now bruised up. She abominated how they treated her, and Nero told her to stop crying. He stood up to show that his knees were bleeding. He looked at her and smiled. He told her to smile and the pain would also stop. He said that they will also get a chance one day. That night, as Evan was sleeping, Nero stood over him with the brand he was given by the emperor. This was the easiest way to relieve himself of Evan. He stopped for a moment and started to suppose about the consequences of his conduct and what will be to his sisters after he was penalized. He decided to put the brand back and go to bed. Neria told him that he made the right decision. The coming morning they were learning about magic. A pupil way over and tells the schoolteacher that he no way used magic before. The professor tells him to imagine commodity rotating on his win and to scream and across it. He did as the schoolteacher said, and he began emitting fire from his win as the schoolteacher told him to not stop. The rest of the scholars were also doing the same thing. Evan astounded all of his classmates when he used a huge spell called Bloom into Deers. The schoolteacher was impressed and told the class not to be discouraged because they will each be suitable to do the same thing. He got near to Evan and he rumored to him that he knows that they hired a private instructor immorally to educate him at the age of and to stop discouraging his fellow classmates. Nero tried it and he also casted a huge spell. Everyone was amazed because they didn't anticipate Slave to be suitable to do it. His spell also faded down. He tried it formerly more, and this time he made a small spell. Everyone started to laugh at him. Neria also succeeded in making a spell. The schoolteacher also took them to train with them as they only demanded to shoot a fire arrow and hit the ersatz straight in the head. This is the basics of the magic that they will be learning. The bones that hit the dummy can go home while the others won't be suitable to leave. They began shooting at the dummies with fire arrows. Nero tried to shoot a fire arrow, but it turned to dust before it could indeed get close to the ersatz. Neria kept motivating him and telling him that ultimately he'd succeed. Nero also felt an extremely painful sensation in his toes, and it turns out that Haken threw a fire arrow at his bases. The schoolteacher extinguished it and told them to be careful. Sorely they were the only shoes that he'd, and they were made by his mama. Most of the scholars succeeded and Nero was left to be the only one. He Atlas struck the dummy and was eventually suitable to go home. The schoolteacher stopped him and told him to stop holding back because he was not deceived. Nero turned around in frustration with his fist covered in deers. He screamed Anakrasha and shot a huge fire arrow that destroyed the entire dummy. He was asked why he was hiding his full eventuality, and he said that he cannot stand out because else he'll be disposed of by the patricians, and he started to cry. The schoolteacher asked him if stressed the nobles, but he shook his head. He rumored to him not to fall for his temptation, else he would unleash the thing inside him. The professors called the scholars the coming day and told them that they will be going through 7 examinations during their time in the academy. Their first test will be the test of strength, and they will be taking it in 3 days. He explains to them that there will be monsters in this trail and they will need to fight them off if they want to reach their thing. The schoolteacher tells them that they're suitable to revive them in case they die. Also, if they find their group mate on the rustic ground that is at the end of the trail, they need to master him because only 3 people will qualify out of the 5 members of each group. Nero wakes up as he hears someone cry. It's Neria. He asks her why she was crying. It turns out that his shoes were torn piecemeal. Nero is stupefied. It turns out that Haken took them that morning for his reason of a morning jam to destroy them. Nero asked her if she wasn't going to go and she said that she would be coming after him. Nero decided to go and do the test without shoes. Neria went to the schoolteacher and asked her for new shoes, but she was told that the person who had the keys to the storehouse house was down and will be back in the summer. She had another idea to fix the shoes. The scholars were told about the rules when they went to the place where the trail was held. The schoolteacher mates for them and they bolt. This test was especially hard on Nero because he had no shoes and the place was rough. As he was going, he came across 2 monsters who attacked him, but he blocked them. He also finishes them off with his magic Meanwhile Neria came to the trail. She was out of breath, but she made it in time. Nero had just finished dealing with the two monsters when he heard someone calling out to him. It turns out it was Neria. She had brought him his shoes and they were fixed. The sweet little girl made them from her own shoes and was left with no shoes. Her legs were indeed bleeding. She smiled while crying and told him that she was not indeed good in the first place, so she was giving her chance to Nero. Nero puts on the shoes and sprints. He'd a plan to help Neria and have her pass the test as well. The other two kiddies were also busy with the test and they were fighting off the monsters. Haken riots at one of the professors that were observing him that his arms were broken, but he didn't watch as they were gone. Nah, heal him. Latterly he meets up with Jack, and after they both have nearly failed, they allowed indeed had crossed the ground, but he didn't. They assumed that Nero has failed, but also they see him sprint over to the ground. He gets onto the ground and turns around to face them. Jackin approaches Nero and tells him to move. He tells him to go home and clean some cow poop. Nero doesn't budge and Jackin starts to laugh at him. Nero stabs him in his shoulder and throws him off the ground fluently. The school teacher takes it from there and Jackin fails the test. Haken asks him how dare he do that to his friend. He rushes at him and swings his brand, but Nero destroys it fluently. With one swing, Haken did not anticipate Nero to be strong enough to break his brand. He throws it down and calls it cheap. He decided to use magic because he remembers that Nero didn't know magic really well, but to his surprise Nero unleashed a huge spell that covered the whole place. He didn't indeed chant the spell. Haken falls down the ground too, and that is how he was disqualified. Nero tells Evan to come at him too. Evan uses a teleportation spell to come at him from over, but Nero blocks it. He uses another spell to throw him off the ground, but Nero heists onto the ground before he falls down. Evan tells him that this is the end and that he will no way be on his position because he is a slave. He shoots at Nero and that's it, but stay. Evan is now in shock. Nero had endured the spell and his choker was showing. He shoots a fire arrow at Evan so that he clears some space. He takes his chance and jumps really high and kicks Evan, making him lose his brand. Evan loses his balance and he's now in the same situation that Nero was in before. Nero, rather than taking this chance, he helps Evan despite everything he had done to him. Meanwhile Neria was left behind. She was crying a lot because she did not meet her haters' prospects, but also she got approached by Nero. He tells her not to cry presently because he has defeated and Haken, meaning there is still a spot for her. Neria smiles through her gashes and thanks him.